is vir my fokusgroep. Ek gaan ongelukkig vra dat ons oorskakel Engels toe, want anders moet ek dit nog translate ook. This transcripts, please. So, as you know, I'm doing research on teaching and learning with technology and how easy and possible it is or how not. So sometimes I'm going to ask questions and we should go around, but other times it's just an open question and you can just jump in and answer as you feel. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to start with you, Vanessa, just asking everyone, how do you learn currently, or did you learn, and yes, so let's start with it. How do you learn?
I learn by reading and speaking. I'm quite an oral person, and I think the way that I have learned or am learning currently is different to how I did when I was younger, because you have your books and you make the notes, but I find I do a lot of research online, using my phone or using my laptop, and then I still make physical notes with it, and we'll go and write it down later. So I'm still quite old school that I need to write something down on paper. But my platform where I get it from has moved away from hard copy to soft copy. But for me to get something into my head, I have to read it, I've got to understand it, and then I've got to speak it. So that's how I learn.
When I've written an exam, I always make summaries.
Okay.
So I read and I make the main things.
Right.
Especially in the higher level, master's degree, you've got your summary, so I'm focusing on the main topics.
Yes.
But even if I now look at something on the internet or read an article, sometimes I make the notes on the article.
Right.
But if you really want to write something, you need to make separate notes.
So we say making notes on the article, is it a printed version or is it printed?
Yeah.
Okay. John?
Reading.
Yes.
And because I lecture tax, focusing on principles.
Right.
Okay, so mostly for me it's reading through the Tax Act.
Yes.
And trying to get the principle out of that section of the Act.
Okay. So almost like a summary of the principle of it.
I also read on soft copies, and I highlight and I make notes on the PDF.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the PDF itself,
Yeah.
you make notes as
Yes,
well.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I read, but I need to read on paper.
Right.
So yes, I search for stuff on the internet, and then I print it out. So I kill the whole forest, but I print double-sided and all that. Yeah. So, but and the textbooks, I need to feel the paper. I need to see it, and then I'll highlight and I will do mind maps. Sort of do a summary of mind map. Then also I need to repeat. So what I see here, if I say it to someone, then I remember it.
Okay.
But I can't read on the screen.
Okay.
I've tried, and it feels that I don't get the whole context. I need to see how many pages, how many paragraphs, go back and forth and make links. I know you can do that on the screen, but I can't.
Okay. Can I ask you what devices you currently have and what is the one that you use the most of?
I've got a tablet, a PC, and a phone. I probably use my phone and my PC the most, and my tablet the least, by far.
Okay.
I use my computer the most.
Okay.
Currently I use a cell phone. I'm reading a lot of new developments, then I'll just look, but then I don't make notes just to see it.
Forward to my device.
But sometimes also I'm listening to webinars, but then while I listen I make the notes because you can't listen to it.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
PC.
PC.
Yes.
Even though you don't have one at the
No,
moment.
I have a PC, I don't have a laptop.
Oh, okay.
Still waiting. Still
Okay.
waiting.
Okay.
I can also my laptop, but I Google a lot on my phone.
Okay.
Yeah, so when I hear a new term or read about somebody, I Google it. I want to, see
Instant.
it. Yeah.
And I generally then send stuff that I've seen on my phone to my email address that I can then go and look at it on a big screen.
Yeah, I have also phone, tablet, and laptop. I prefer on my laptop. So if I need to show the kids something, even though I'm standing with my cell phone in my hand, I said, let's quickly go. I can show you where's Mecca on my PC. So got all the devices, but I prefer working on the laptop. I think because the screen is bigger.
Okay, so I want to show you flashcards, and I want you to please tell me where do you feel that you fit in terms of your adoption of new technologies. Okay, so firstly we have an innovator. So an innovator is somebody, oh dear, it's very small. I love new technologies, and I'm among the first to experiment with and use them. Then you have an early adopter. I like new technologies and use them before most people I know. Then you have early majority. So I use new technologies when other people start to use them. Then we have the late majority. I usually use technologies when most people I know are already using them. And then we have a laggard. I am usually one of the last people I know to use new technologies. So Vanessa, I'm going to start with you. Just want to write this down. What do you?
I'm an early majority.
I'm a late majority.
Joe?
Stella, proef dan.
So I think you.
I think I'm an early adopter for my age group.
Yes,
But I'm a early majority.
early majority. Okay.
Also early majority.
Thank you. Okay, so if we now come to our students and what we are currently seeing in our classrooms and how we observe them learning, do you think it is possible that they can learn with technology, that they're doing it effectively? What is needed for them to be able to learn effectively with technology? We can just jump in.
I think they can.
Right.
I don't think they necessarily do. I think that we are under the impression that because they walk around with a smartphone or a device that they are tech savvy. I think they're social media savvy. I don't think they're tech savvy. I think the advantage of this generation, they're not scared of this, or tablets or technology or apps or anything like that. And I think they have a huge amount of information that they process on these things. But I don't know if they necessarily know how to use it to learn, because the majority of our students in South Africa literally don't even have textbooks. So now they need to make the jump into university by going from no books to devices. And I think there's a knack that you need. You need to be familiar with it. You need to know how it works. You need to know how to make notes and summarize and do all these things, and that takes practice. And I don't think they have it. So I think they can, but I don't think they do. And I think a lot of our students don't have access to the right devices for learning. So yes, they have the cell phone and they've got the labs, but when they go home or they go to res, what can they use? They don't have Wi-Fi, they don't have the computers, they don't have tablets, they don't have laptops. So I think there's a huge challenge, there's a hurdle of yes they can, but they don't. And I think there's a lot of reasons in between as to why.
I think the problem we have is not that our students can't learn. They don't know how to study, whether it's with or without technology. Right. A while ago in a facet class, we spoke about making a summary of the case law, and then I said, but if you're done with the summary, you still need to go and study it. So the fact that you've done a summary doesn't mean you're done studying. And I sort of joked and said, my grade 5 daughter thinks once she's done with the summary, she's done studying. And they started laughing, and I'm not. At first I thought they're laughing because I've got a daughter in grade 5, and then they said, no, ma'am, we're laughing because she's studying in grade 5. You're not supposed to study in grade 5. You are supposed to pass on just sitting in class. And I think then I realized that our students didn't learn how to study. They didn't learn how to learn, so that they sort of go through high school or primary school at first, and then high school. With only the bare necessities, and they think they do well, whereas maybe the marks were adjusted, and they don't know how to study. So whether it's with or without technology, I don't think they know how to study.
Yeah, I want to say the same. That step that we did, we were write it down like summaries. I think they're missing that step. So they've got all this information,
Right.
but because they haven't put it on paper, they haven't learned it.
Right.
When they get into exam, they don't have the right knowledge.
We quite often in tax we do examples. We give the question, but in the slides we don't give the solution. So in class they need to write down the solution. And most of the time when the solution is up, they all sit with their phones and they take a picture. And I've started to joke and say when you take a picture it goes to the memory of your phone, it's not going to your memory. So you're not taking your phone, well it's in the exam but you can't use it. So it doesn't help, you've got it on your technology memory, it's not in your memory. So I think that's another thing that a problem we have with the technology. They think they've got it, but they don't have it. The technology has it.
Okay.
And then they've got this false thing because I have the solution, but it's not I who have the solution. It's my iPhone or Samsung or whatever.
And I believe strongly that you cannot study
On
on
a phone.
such a small device. The other thing I also believe, and I spoke to an expert on this, is if you've got your phone with you and it pings, you are distracted and your brain cannot concentrate.
But you see, I listen to a lot of webinars recently, and then I normally do it on my phone because I listen what they say and I make my notes. So at the end I'm looking at my notes.
But that's not what the students do. They say that if you walk amongst them, they are all on some kind of Facebook
Social media.
or social media.
But they say that, and I mean, we're all guilty of this to some degree, I think, with these phones. It's like an extension of your hand. That if you are busy with something and you stop to check something on your phone, it takes 15 minutes for you to be able to fully immerse yourself back into what you were doing. You're distracted for another 15 minutes by what you've just read or thought or something along those lines. So I know a lot of the CTA students tell me that they actually switch their phones off while they're studying so that there isn't that distraction. But I agree with you, Prof. I don't think you can learn effectively here. I think it's a good source of initial information. But Marianne, what you said, it just means that you've now got access to it. So they've got fantastic access to information. They just don't know what to do with it and how to do it. And I think it makes for lazy learners because you do have everything right here. I mean, you and I had the conversation, if your son wants something, he does a YouTube video, you know. But it's that active involvement that, okay, I've got it, but now I need to do something with it. I need to understand it. I need to analyze it. I mean, we got criticized in our CTA paper because we changed the word from, what was it? We usually use critically analyze to like criticize or something like they've never seen that word before. You know, and it's that inability that I think, unfortunately, as great as the technology is and gives us access, is a stumbling block. Because it's so accessible, we do less with it.
I agree about laziness. Think before we had cell phones. How many telephone numbers did you know of by heart?
How many do you know now?
Like I had to think very hard over the weekend what my husband's number is. But you sort of knew all the people in your family, their landlines. But now we're lazy because it's here, it's in my hand, it's close to me, so I don't need to know the telephone numbers. And I think that's the same with the work they need to study. I can quickly check, so I don't need to remember it for that long. But I can't quickly check in the exam.
And there's no deep learning anymore.
It's all very superficial, and we see that in some of the later, you know, professional qualifications and things like that. It's very superficial. Students are really not grappling with what's really going on here because there is so much, and to a certain extent I think that's the one thing that technology, as great as it is, I mean, I can find out what's going on in Timbuktu like 5 seconds ago, and if there's a bomb that goes off in America, then you know about it immediately. But it's here, oh no, whereas in the past you might get one article the next day's paper, but you would read that whole thing and get all the information about it. Not just, oh look, there's 40 articles about the bomb that went off.
Yeah, so it really went off.
Yeah.
So sort of, you don't go into who's suspected
No,
and what
why
happened and
was
how many
there,
died. You just saw 40 times the bomb went off. Okay, so it must be true.
And on the other hand, do you really need to know that? You know,
Yeah.
there are so many things that we know about.
But do we need to know? That's very true.
Yeah.
Like it didn't faze us 20 years ago not knowing that. And now it seems, it's like pictures of these reality stars. I didn't care what Kim Kardashian was doing when she was 21. And I still don't.
Vanessa, you mentioned that, yes, they can learn with technology, but they don't necessarily do it well. Is that our problem that we have to solve, this gap that they're having? Is it their problem? What should we do?
I think it's a shared problem. Unfortunately, and I hate to go back to blaming government and where we've come from and all the rest of it, but if you look at the tertiary education landscape currently, we are getting more and more responsibility put on us to develop students post-matric. That's not happening in their primary and secondary education. It's becoming tertiary education's problem. I mean, it's not enough that we don't have fees must fall, but we have to develop ethical students and critical thinkers and. But no one's laying the foundation here. And I come back to something that Prof. Ben always says about our students. He says, it's not that they're stupid. You know, you just have to understand how to kind of unlock that potential. So there's only so much that the government's going to do. And I mean, we can sit here all day and debate the fact that we need more Wi-Fi, we need more resources. It's not going to happen. And tertiary education, I still believe to this day, is a privilege. We are trying to get it more open access. I understand the reasons for it, but I do think it's a privilege. But I do think we're being very unfair to some of the students that end up at tertiary education because they don't have the resources and they don't have the skills and they don't have the capability. So if we want them to be successful, we need to bridge that gap. So yes, I do think we have a certain responsibility to guide them along that way. I think the other responsibility comes from their side to be willing participants in this and to be open to what is happening and that we're actually trying to do it for their benefit. I think students' attitudes are very much, oh, you're against me, you want me to fail. I don't think they often think that we're trying to help them to pass. But I do think it's a shared responsibility, and it is Department of Higher Education, government, the university itself, the lecturers and the students. So I don't think you can place all the emphasis, the responsibility on one party. But I do think we have a role to play. And it's not necessarily us providing them with the platforms, but it's us providing them with a context and the skills to be able to use it and how that aids in their learning and how that aids in their critical thinking. Okay?
They don't know what they don't know. So, I mean, how can they do it on their own?
But I think this language is also a problem because they don't know how to read.
Right.
And even if you talk about all this, sometimes you need to go back to that basics.
The basics.
But what I also see is, especially some of the private schools, they bring all this new technology in the school. And those children with a few years' time, they will be much more prepared for the technology. So you will see some schools would be quite prepared, others not.
But that's just going to increase the divide,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Because there are schools out there that are doing amazing stuff with technology. And there are schools out there who have no technology but do amazing stuff for their kids. Unfortunately, they're not preparing the kids for the fourth industrial revolution because everything is being driven by that.
They start building robots and stuff like that.
Yeah. My daughter's building a car. She's in grade 5.
Okay, so we're sitting here with this gap, and you know we need to be relevant in the fourth industrial revolution. So maybe we can just first ask ourselves, what skills do you think our accounting students will need when they leave here?
Critical thinking.
Adaptability. The world's changing at a far greater pace than ever before, and if you're hesitant to change and to take on the change and embrace it, you're going to get left behind. And I think as accountants inherently, I mean, okay, I shouldn't speak generalized, but we are tend to be slightly more conservative and change. I mean, even though IFRS changes every year, it's very much within our realm. But we're going to have to teach these kids to be flexible and to adapt really quickly, and that it's not about the content so much as about how to access the content, read the content, critically think about the content, analyze it, and then use it. So I don't think we're going to be necessarily having to teach them all the theories anymore, but about the principles, like Jock was saying. It's about what's the principle here, and then how do you use those principles? How do you use the basics to take that forward? So I think critical thinking definitely, but I think that adaptability to change is going to become quite important.
And responsibility. That they take responsibility for this. Now we sort of take them by the hand, and if something change, we tell them. They should now identify change and do it. So there's not going to be someone to say, you should now do this, you should do that, look at this. So if you're not responsible for your own learning or own growing in this fourth industrial revolution, you're going to stay behind.
And accountability with that.
I get the feeling they just want to become CAs and then that's that.
Yeah, once they've got the qualification, they're going to get the money.
Yes, yeah.
That's the end of the story.
Yeah. And there's very little enthusiasm about learning.
Learning is like there. I don't think they understand that the learning is actually
To get there.
there's so much
And to
that you get through the learning to get there.
Lifelong learning.
Exactly.
Yeah. But there will also be a move away from certain technical things. When you focus on technical now, there will be much more specialized areas. I can specialize in blockchain, I can specialize in that. And so after they finish, I think they will have more opportunity for different work. But they need then to skill themselves for the change.
But I think if there are students who can critically think, who can take accountability for that, who can be flexible and adaptable to that, then they can say, look, these are the skills that I have. How do I replicate these skills just in a different setting? How do I use what I can do to do something different? But I don't think we're there yet, because students don't see that. They don't see that we're trying to create pervasive skills or develop pervasive skills. They just see, they need 50% to pass. They don't see the bigger context of it, and they're very much on the short term. I must get the CA qualification. To do that, I must pass year 1, 2, 3. So they're very short term focused without thinking of, okay, well now I'm a CA, now what?
And they're not willing to work hard. I remember a few years ago I had a student who was in the middle of the second year who came to me and said, but when does the hard work stop? I said, well, my dear, you're now at the middle of your second year. Second semester is still there. Third year is even more difficult. And then you do CTA, which is a hell of a lot difficult. And then you're going to do articles where you're going to work like 12 to 20 hours a day. And she sort of looked at me in disbelief, because in her mind, when she's a CA, you don't work hard anymore. So that's also, I think, that they're not willing to work hard. So lots of students also who say, but they want to be CAs. They say, why? They say, because I want to earn a lot of money. And I said, well, it doesn't matter if you're a CA or not a CA. If you are willing to work hard, you will earn a lot of money. So they just want to see the money, they don't want to do the work. So that's another skill.
But I'm wondering about coding, because all the young people that I know that do well, doesn't matter whether they're lawyers or engineers, they all code. And the programs that I watch on TV, they just talk about the ability to code. I'm wondering if, one shouldn't teach the students that at school. I don't know.
But don't you think it's too late at tertiary level? I feel like there should be some compulsory coding, and I hate to compare this to what my daughters are doing, but that's my biggest reference. Since grade 4, my child does robotics at school. And it's now becoming, so it's been an extramural, but from next year it becomes part of the curriculum from grade 4. And it's not hugely technical, it's the basics, it's the ones, and it's a way of thinking more than anything else.
Yeah.
It's for her and her team that are building this car to understand the logic as to why you put this piece before this piece and that goes there, and how you make the wheels turn and how you make it go left and right. And that's what excites me, is just the way that she can think about things. So I don't know if it's necessarily coding to be able to write these fancy programs. I think you can have a very basic level of coding that should be compulsory for all kids, just to teach a way of thinking So I agree with you on the coding, but I don't think we need everyone to be coders. I think we're going to need a lot of people to interpret code and to be able to implement code and understand what's coming out of that. But if you've got a basic understanding to say, I want you to code something for me, this is what I want. If you can understand that and tell that to someone and then use the data, I think that's going to be even more powerful.
But on the other hand, we are including coding in our master's degrees
Really?
from next year.
I think that's great.
But that is more the coding on empirical finance, and it's more to analyze data.
Oh, that's like the coding we do.
Yeah. So that we're going to do.
So again, it's a way of thinking.
Yeah. But there is a view that people of future need to understand the certain basics of coding to interpret contracts and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there should be something on coding.
And I think if you can get ahead of that now, you're setting yourself up for success later on. Because we are going to have jobs that are redundant. I mean, that's a reality. There's such routine stuff that coding and robotics and AI and all these things are going to take over, that already have taken over. I mean, these firms, I watched a presentation from, I think it was PwC. Remember how we used to do not bank confirmations, debtors confirmations. They literally, you get your Excel spreadsheet from the client, you select your sample, you put it into the program, it gets sent to India. You leave at 5 o'clock that afternoon, by 8 o'clock the next morning, boom, you've got your stuff. I mean, it's bank confirmations. They were saying they've now got a system to do bank confirmations, so they ran a pilot. Now remember in our article, if there was a company with 100 bank accounts, you literally just wanted to, because you got a phone, you got to type it all up, you got to do everything. So they ran a parallel test. So they had first you'd do it physically, these 100 bank confirmations, and then they had the program do it. Okay, 100% accuracy on the program as well. It took the clerk 3.5 days, so call it 4 days, to do 100 bank confirmations. How long do you think it took the program?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. And the only reason it took 30 seconds is because of the firewall. If it wasn't for the firewall, it would have taken 10.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look at the efficiency of that. You take away the, 4 days
days.
worth of salary to do something in 30 seconds. And that's the reality. But now you need someone that when you get those 100 responses, I need to know what to do with that, because my computer's not going to be able to tell me. They can point out some stuff, but what do you do with that? What does it mean for my audit opinion? What does it mean for the balance? Is there material misstatement? I think that's where we need to focus energy as well. So to understand how it works, why it works, but what do I do with this? And that's where the critical thinking comes in.
So if I hear you correctly, our students are going to need critical thinking, being able to learn, lifelong learning, adaptability. And if I'm correct in saying is we cannot separate that from technology. It's part of technology, or can it be separated from technology?
For me, I think we're moving into an era where it's going to be very difficult for it to not be part of technology. I mean, it's part of your everyday life. But just on that, I think one of the things that also our students are going to need in this age of AI and technology is EQ. I think our EQ is going to become more and more important as we hand over certain tasks to the machines. I think our ability to interact, to communicate, because we're losing that. I think that's one aspect that is also critical for our students, is to not say, well, the machine does everything, but we need to be able to communicate that. So,
and with that decision making, you would need to know how to make the decisions based on the information.
Okay.
And creativity.
Although I think all those skills was maybe applicable 20 years ago when we didn't have technology.
Right.
So the skills are not new skills. I think it's just now being, you need to quicker adapt because things are happening quicker due to technology. But critical thinking, adaptability, lifelong learning, that was also 20 years ago. I think,
but
if you had the same thing 20 years ago, then the same things would have come up, and we didn't have technology, or we had technology, but not at this rapid growth.
Yeah, but I think it's stumped by the young. I feel the students that I've had for the past 2 years are vastly different from the ones I've had before, and they sort of, it's what I feel, that's stumped. This EQ, they sort of blend.
Because you interact like this. You see a group of
Yes,
friends,
yeah.
they're all sitting at the
Yeah.
dinner table and they're all doing this.
Yes.
And they're not, they don't know how to read social cues.
Yeah.
And I see that when students come and consult with me, like the student that came today. I know he has some issues, but his inability to communicate what is actually necessary. And I'm seeing more and more of that. These students who their EQ, their social awareness, and I think ethicality. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've seen a huge drop in the ethicality of students. I mean, we just have to take tomorrow. But it's because there's no accountability here. You can send someone the rudest message. You can call them out on Facebook. There's no consequences. And now we're expecting them to have. They don't understand why faking a sick note. Why is it a big deal?
What's the problem?
They see fake news all day. They see Kim Kardashian or whoever putting on filters and whatever's, you know. It's okay. It doesn't have to be real.
How much do you make use of technology in your teaching?
Not enough. This year I found I've only really started to scratch the tip of the iceberg. I think you've also got to be careful that you don't begin to rely on it too much, because I think part of the success for our department and for our program, and I'm talking CTA specific here, is that human element, but you also have to remember that it is a different generation. They don't learn the way we did for various reasons. But like the videos, this was the first year where I really embraced videos. I try to bring one or two things into the classroom. So I think I'm scratching. I'm a early majority. I'm looking to see what my colleagues are doing and what works and what doesn't work. And I think there's a lot more that I could do a lot better. I think I'm totally underutilizing Blackboard, if I'm honest. I think there's so much more functionality in Blackboard that is so beneficial that I could use, but I think we're all still trying to navigate this blended learning approach. So I definitely think there's more I could do. Okay.
I agree with Vanessa. Also more I can do. Every year we try to do one thing more. But technology grows so rapidly that one thing more maybe is not enough anymore. But also sometimes it feels that we're so busy with the admin, the people who are cheating and who did not attend all the tutorials, that we don't have time to go and see what is available, what can we do. Because for something to have an assessment on Blackboard, you need to go and set it. It doesn't happen overnight. Then it's just sometimes easier to take a question from 2004 and change it and give it to them on paper than to go and do the input. So yes, technology makes it easier, but from the user or from the person who wants to do the assessment, there's some input from your side, which I don't think we always have the time. Then just go back to old ways because of time.
But also I think we've got to be careful that we don't just default to technology the whole time. I take the 30 seconds game that you played with the accounting 200 students. That's a very non-technology driven tutorial. And I think it's amazing vehicle for learning. I think the students had huge value out of it. I think it's something that we could adopt. So I think we must also be careful as educators that we don't tip too far to the other side, because something like that in a half an hour tutorial I think is far more beneficial than them answering some online questions on Blackboard. So I think we need to find that balance too, that we're not sticking too much to the traditional way, or that we're not going too far on the technology side, because I think there's value in both, and we need to get the best out of both.
And also think outside the box. So use technology, but not Blackboard only.
Yes.
For one of our assignments, we had the students making videos on the case law. Actually, one of the students gave me the idea, because for tax returns we've got a lot of case law they need to study. And one said, but ma'am, is there not a movie about the cases? And then I thought, okay, but let's make you movies. So one of the assignments were in groups of 5, they had to make a short video, which they could use their cell phone to make the movie. And they had lots of fun. So they actually said, wow, this was interesting. And now they know this case because in the 3 to 5 minutes, they had to have the backgrounds and the principle and the outcome. And they loved it. And that was technology with very little input from my side, because I only had to sit the assignment on Blackboard and they had to submit on that. So that was good, I think, good use of technology where I didn't have to go back and put questions on Ulink.
Yeah, but you've got to be creative because you have to stimulate, you know, just looking at a screen and click, 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 really how much like input is that? But where you've got to go and create a video and maybe you want to think about what order we're going to put it in and who's going to speak and, you know, oh, have we covered all 5 of the things? Like, I think that stimulates learning a lot more than just click, click, click. So I think that's where your point on creativity is so important.
Yeah, but it's a challenge.
It
takes a lot of work, and then they don't even access Blackboard. You know, it needs to be very interesting, I think, for them to.
And it's sometimes difficult. Like I say to them, Companies Act is not interesting. You know, I don't know how to make it interesting for you, and I don't have the budget to get can-can dancers and clowns and circus trapeze artists in class to keep you stimulated. They're just some things that you're going to have to push through. And I think they also need to know that, you know, learning is something that you take on board, and we try and make it as interesting and relevant as possible, but sometimes it's a case that you just have to work through it. Like, we all just work through it, you know. Because I think the problem is they're so easily bored, this generation. There's so much entertainment at the drop of the touch of a screen, that they sit in class, and if you haven't like cracked a joke in 20 minutes, then, you know, and that's also not right, because you know, it is about being able to sit and absorb and take in and not be entertained the whole time, which I think is a huge challenge. And I mean, I look at my kids. Yes, we'd had a lovely weekend. It was the rugby, there was Halloween on Saturday and whatnot. And then yesterday they're like, so what are we doing today? Seriously, we've just had this, we went to your cousin's on Friday night, we had dinner, we had this full day at your cousin's house with all these activities, and now understand, like, so what are we doing today? I'm bored. You know, so we've got to be very careful of that constant need to entertain. I think we're also sending a false message through that.
That's, I think, a generational thing.
No, totally.
Because my 15 and 13-year-old is fine. The 11-year-old, like yours, very quickly, what are we doing today that is nice?
I'm bored.
Yes. Well, can we do something nice? No, we need to study.
Go read a book. Go play in the garden. Make up a song. Write a poem. Colour a picture. You know, that's the opportunity to say, well, go and get creative. You know, because I think creativity also sometimes happens in that boredom.
But learning on the cell phone is also sometimes boring. If you look at these new developments and some of those people are boring. But you know, I want the information, so you listen to them.
We've got a big assignment in the second semester where they go calculate tax for an individual on an Excel spreadsheet, and it's marked online, and then they have to fill out the tax return like they would on e-filing.
Okay.
So they go in, there's all these things, what are your address, there's an IRP5, there's certificates from the banks with your interest on it, your medical aid certificate, all of that, and they must put it into the tax return.
And how do the students experience it?
No, they like it, they did well at it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. I've got 2 more questions. So the one is, so I know in undergraduate, I know CTA and masters, we might do it differently, but in undergraduate, all the material is on Blackboard. We don't print anything, nothing for them. But then we assess them, and it's a paper-based assessment. Is there a disconnect?
Yes. And I think students can't write anymore. They're used to typing. So when they have to write, it takes them long. You can't read what they've written because they're not used to writing anymore. Even though we give them papers and we say go and do them, the memos there, go and mark it, they just compare the paper with the memo. So they never get to write and see how long does it take me to do a capital gains tax question, and then to write it. So yes, there's a disconnect. I'm not sure how to solve it, because there's been studies showing that if you write something, there's sort of the stroomboom from your hand to your head, so you learn. But if you just see it on the screen, the neural pathway, thank you.
And when you make it in colours, it works more.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, because you all mentioned when I started off, it is that you learn, you take the screen, but then you make notes. In some way or other, all of us
I'm still
said
writing.
we are making notes. Now we're saying our students are probably not doing that, but we expect them to do that when it comes to an assessment. And we're just wondering. So I had the article clerks in a focus group, and their suggestion was that we should at least print out the question banks for students. I don't know if you think that would help to solve the problem.
But the fact that we're not printing it doesn't mean they should not be printing
Yeah.
it, because they've got a budget on their student card. They've got money to
100
print.
rand.
Is it only 100 rand?
Yes.
So you can print 10 pages.
Exactly.
Okay, not that. Okay.
I do
So
think
it's
again,
very small amount that they have.
I think we say as a university we follow a blended learning approach, and that means that we need to give some form of our material on paper based if that's the way we expect to assess them. So I'm very much a proponent of either the slides or the question banks. I don't think you need to necessarily print everything, but talking to my clerks as well, I mean, they printed and they were lucky enough to be of the socioeconomic standard where they could afford to print it. So, you know, that's where the challenges start to come in. But I think something needs to be printed if we're expecting them to answer that way. And I think the clerk's suggestion of the question bank is a very good one, because
even if it's without the memos, only
Exactly.
the questions.
and the memos they can go and get online, because then they need
Can
to be
do it
forced
and
to-
they can mark looking at the screen.
Or even if they just sit with it and they highlight and they make notes, but some form of our material needs to be on hard copy, because I've seen students come in and because of a lack of funds, they are printing 6 to a page, 6 pages to 1 page. How that's like trying to read it on your phone. It's just,
It doesn't work.
no, it's crazy.
I'm going to say two things. I don't think there's a proper disconnect, because everything isn't interactive. It's just another way of presenting them, because they can print. Everything was interactive and we tested in
Yes.
In an
Okay.
interactive way.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, right.
And I think they should actually get their textbooks as online, because they're not buying textbooks. We did a survey now with 8 universities to find out which textbooks they use. Everybody has the same problem. Students are no longer buying textbooks. So if we're
That's
not
an
going
issue.
to give it to them, they're not going to.
That's a huge issue. Especially for something like the CA degree and the accounting degree, where it's based in case law or standards, and if you don't have access to those standards, you can't be successful.
One other thing, which is maybe just a little bit related, is working on screens the whole day is not good for your eyes.
Fatigue.
Yes. So eyes do deteriorate, and my ophthalmologists also say that you can definitely see, since we are working on screens, and kids who normally they don't get glasses now have to get glasses. And I think that's also a problem for our students when they write, is that they can't see properly, the letters are swimming. Because on a screen you can make it bigger. So if you can't see properly, and now you've got a paper that's been printed, you can't make it bigger. So just maybe next year we should get the Optom department to come and test all our students.
It's an interesting.
Yeah, but that's another thing, that we give it to them on the screen where they can make it bigger. Now we give them a paper and you can't click and drag the paper. That's the size bar stays the same.
That's interesting.
And a lot of our students,
Observation.
again, can't afford whatever it is. I mean, I've seen CTA students that sit around like this. And then you say, go and have your eye test, and they say, I don't have money.
Because I know Optom, when I was a student, used to go to Limpopo and all of those places where they tested and they gave glasses away for free. You can actually tell them you don't need to go to Limpopo, you can just come to APK. So have your thing set up here and give people glasses.
That's not a bad initiative from
Yeah,
next year.
yeah.
Seriously, we must talk to Stefani
Mm.
as a CSR initiative.
Okay, so just lastly, we talked about learning with technology and the challenges that you have. So if you had a wish, or this is possible, could happen, what would you want to see so that we have effective learning happening in front of us?
How much time you got?
I think the students should just take responsibility and learn, not blame technology or not having technology. They should just be responsible for their own learning and learn with what they have. Or then if you don't have everything, use what you have. But I almost feel that they also blame technology for not learning.
Okay. Ban cell phones.
Yes.
Only PCs, yeah. Then you,
Yeah, my wish list, I think I would want more printing to take place of material. We understand budget, so it can't be everything, but I think there's academic reason for a case to say some of the material needs to be printed. Resources for students and resources for lecturers. I think we're all muddling around trying to find our way. I think we're one of the few departments that's embracing this, but yeah, I sometimes do feel like I'm floating in time. Like you say, I get so overwhelmed with admin to now try and find the time of how Blackboard works and how I can use this. And I keep telling myself I'm going to do it, but I just don't find the time. I'm just lucky that I've got colleagues who I can walk in and say, X, Y, and Z. And for our students, as much as I agree that I think they need to take accountability, they've never been taught to take accountability. They've never had to do it at school. If you failed, you got pushed through because that's the rule, and 30% is a pass for matric, and now you can exit at this level, and so they've never been taught that. So my wish list would be to say, I think we need a better primary and tertiary education system. I think we need proper teachers who can teach and educate and lead these students and create a lot of what we need coming into tertiary education. So yeah, my wish list is about that long.
I think we also need to change as lecturers, and part of that is that all of us can't do everything. We need to help each other, and we need to get sometimes people come and talk about new developments. How do you do this? There's so much things that we can do that we don't know because we don't know the technology.
You don't know what you don't know.
I told Marlies, my sister is at UP, but engineering department. She's constantly getting training in IT. Constantly. Teaching. Teaching. Yeah, so, yeah.
And we're the
maybe we'll
4IR
Yeah.
champions, yeah.
Yes.
I would say resources for the students. I also agree with Vanessa, the printing. I can't remember how many classes I've seen students sitting there with nothing in front of them.
Not even paper.
Yeah, they don't have the slides, they don't have a textbook. So that's my
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Bye.